A More Beautiful Life is a listener-supported show. You can learn more about the benefits you receive from your support, such as access to other courses, special access to tools, blogs, and skills through our Patreon channel, patreon.com/A More Beautiful Life. Hello, you are listening to A More Beautiful Life podcast, recognizing, appreciating, and integrating earliest life experiences. My name is Kate White, and I created this podcast because of my passion for my work as a therapist and an educator in preventing and resolving earliest trauma. I believe that integrating our earliest experiences brings us closer to who we really are. On the show, I will be having discussions with others on the path who have explored healing our earliest experiences in life, or who, in my opinion, have found ways to live a more beautiful life. Today on the show we have Gerhard Schroth. He is a teacher and provider of prenatal bonding BA. I'm going to read to you his bio in his own words that he sent me. Born and raised in Heidelberg immediately after World War II, I was lucky to get a medical education and made my way through psychiatry, psychoanalysis, and various other orientations of psychotherapy before I started my outpatient office. The pregnancy and birth of 3 children gave my wife and me the option to see the world from a different perspective, inspired by Frédéric Le Boyer and Michel Audin, and bonding had happened to us long before I clearly understood what was really involved in the course of a pregnancy and the process of giving birth. Meeting William Emerson in 1996, I realized how limited my knowledge was as a medical doctor in psychoanalysis. He was the first to really open my eyes to the prenatal and perinatal world. I trained and researched with him, Carlton Terry, and others in Switzerland and the U.S. for about 10 years. Since 2003, I was fortunate to get trained by the Hungarian psychoanalysts Janel Rafai and György Hidis, the originators of prenatal bonding BA, as one of the first in Germany. Again, an invitation by William Emerson to present at the Hungarian Method to the APA Congress in Asilomar in 2009 brought Michael Trout into my life and career. Immediately after the conference, he encouraged and invited me to teach prenatal bonding BA in the U.S. beginning in 2011. Since the very early passing of the originators in 2014, I had to continue Rafi's training in Germany until now. Receiving the APA Research Award in 2019 for my pre- and perinatal commitment to the U.S. filled me with gratitude and great humility. Please enjoy this interview with Gerhard Schroth and I. We had quite a few things in common, and there's such a joy that we share around the sentience and spirituality of the baby. And today on the show we have Gerhard Schroth from Germany, whose specialty is prenatal bonding, and I'm just so thrilled to have you here. I'm so glad you could make it.
Yes, thank you so much to you, Kate White, to invite me to this podcast, which is a great honor for me that Americans see that something is happening in Germany.
Well, something's happening with you. I mean, for sure. I know you and I have known each other over the years, meeting at APA, and I know you're a good friend of Michael Trout, who's been a big part of my online school, but I've been following prenatal bonding for a long time, and I know a little bit about the beginnings of your work, Prenatal Bonding BA, but I'm wondering if you could tell our listeners a little bit more about you and your work and just how you got started.
Yeah, looking back to my own history, I would say I just started as a very ordinary psychoanalyst and medical doctor about 40 years ago. And when it was about 25 years ago, I came across William Emerson. That was my first big impression about pre and perinatal psychology. which was on my perspective also before. I read books of Stan Grof, for example, which showed us there is much more than medicine and psychoanalysis knows until now. And seeing and hearing William Emerson in Heidelberg was a big, big breakthrough for me in my own personal development, as including the pre and perinatal perspective of my own history brought so much more knowledge and clearness into my mind, which I never had expected, even having done psychoanalysis for 15 or 20 years.
So did you do Stan Grof's holotropic breath work? I mean, was there a process that you engaged with? Did you do William Emerson's training, or?
Wait a minute. You have the book here of Stan Grof.
Yeah, he's written so many books.
Yeah, but this book, he had described his experience with regression work that brought up the material that happened before birth. And that was really thrilling to me, that that people can remember that. And then we have David Chamberlain, was his research he did. And so it took me 10 years with William Emerson, and we are good friends meanwhile, after all this long training together and working together, researching. And but the story about prenatal bonding BA, I also name it BA, as prenatal bonding BA says prenatal bonding by Jenny Raphael, the originator of this method, as prenatal bonding in general is used in other contexts and is not the same than prenatal bonding BA.
Well, yeah, can we go back a second? Because I just want to go back to your story about Stan Grof. And I studied with William Emerson and then Carlton Terry. And of course, we had to go through, they'd like to start with the birth process, which we did over and over. But the last module was on the prenatal experience. And that is where I fell in love with prenatal work, pre and perinatal psychology. It was the prenates experience that impressed me so very much. Is that what you're saying, Gerhard, that's what you were also attracted to?
Well, I experienced my own conception in a regression work with William, and I was really puzzled that I would be able to remember that. And I even made the challenge to my parents and told them about my conceiving, and they agreed. Maybe 80% of my perception from this regression work was true, was really true.
Well, that's amazing. Yeah, because I actually have had patterns going back to being an egg in my mother that I was able to connect with doing that work with Carlton Terry, and it did really help. It cleared up a lot of things, and just to recognize that it was a memory and not something wrong with me was really relieving and releasing.
I had the same experience with Carlton as well. In trainings he did in his home in Denver.
Yeah, that's where I was also. But
we started at the same time. You started in 95 and I started in 96.
No, actually, I didn't go out. I didn't go out till 2002, I think, to Colorado to be with Carlton. But I started with having clients remember their births in 1999, and I had a baby at the time, so I couldn't go. I didn't go anywhere. But once he turned 2, I felt like I could go, and I did. And that was But William and I mean, he was the one that really helped me understand the memories that people were having, because I didn't know it was possible. And it came through the craniosacral therapy for me.
Yeah, that's a different and more sentient
Mhm.
access you have to these experiences.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's how I got the start. It was fascinating. I mean, I think I just swooned, really, honestly. But
Mhm.
and that's why, I mean, I so appreciate you, Gerhard, because when you come to me and say, I feel the same way about babies that you do. I've wanted to talk with you ever since, but
Mhm.
we're getting ahead of ourselves in the story, because I want to go back now to the prenatal bonding BA. Now, I'm familiar with Rafai's research. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about him and how you started to pick up his work?
Yeah, I met him in 1990 in Mannheim, which is close to Speyer, my office. And I was immediately, I was well prepared by the studies that I did with William, and um, and so I was very impressed what he did with pregnant women. He presented in Mannheim for the first time his research and his work. And since then, since 1990, I always asked him, you must show us, you must train us your work.
Mhm.
And so it took us until 2003 that he and Ludwig Janus, you may know him from Heidelberg, he is one of the father figures in our German pre and perinatal society. And he invited Jenny Rafai to come to Heidelberg and train us uh, and deliver what he had researched on. And well, as I was prepared about pre and perinatal, I knew immediately that communication between the mother and the baby uh, would be possible, but I did not believe it in the first moment. So
Mhm.
it's unbelievable to understand that there is a baby that gives responses. So if the mother sends a picture to the baby can answer in a
Mhm.
picture, in a symbolic way.
Mhm.
And that was a great breakthrough, which gave us the chance to understand how babies are sentient. That was known already, but that babies may be a wise personality that
Mhm.
sometimes calms down anxieties that mothers have before birth and things that change. So babies bring with them um, already a kind of wisdom
Mhm.
and a kind of standing that sometimes the pregnant mothers don't have.
Yes. Yes, that's my experience, even within myself, to feel the baby. The baby, to me, in my experience, was more, had more sort of spiritual essence than I felt like I did as the adult, having my own healings happen and accessing these deep feelings of compassion and forgiveness, which was surprising to me. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a few stories, Gerhard, for people listening, like when you say there's wisdom in the baby, the preborn baby. Can you tell some stories for our
Yeah.
listeners?
There is maybe one story that was interesting. It was during a session of prenatal bonding BA that the mother reported to the baby what she had done with her mother and what her mother said. And after a while, the baby answered in the sense that it says, "Oh, don't talk too much about grandma. I'm eager to hear more about grandpa." Uh, And later on, we understood that the relation to grandpa was much stronger than the relation of the baby, the later born, was much stronger to grandpa even than grandma. The baby's mother had a strong connection to her mother, but the baby inside was connected to the grandpa.
Oh, interesting.
And the grandpa became his best friend after it.
Ah, that's so interesting. Yeah. Well, I remember when we were at before I go to that question, I know that you have a training coming up, and you've trained 2 cohorts or 3, I can't remember.
And we had many cohorts trained in Germany. We trained 1 cohort in the US, in Champaign, as well as in Seattle. And the next cohort will happen here in Germany in our own institute.
Can you describe some of the training so that people can get a sense of what the training entails?
Well, there is theory needed about the understanding and the procedure of prenatal bonding BA, but there are some more parts of the training which refer to the own experience. So if you do prenatal bonding BA with pregnant mothers, it's somehow the same as if you do psychoanalysis to your patients, as psychoanalysis allows to react with your own history to the experience the patient is telling. And that happens in prenatal bonding in a similar way. As experiences the mother tells about her history in the beginning when we doing the questionnaire, which goes over 3, 4, 5 sessions, to really go deep into the history of her story, the story of her parents, and even the story of the grandparents of both sides, the mother's side, father's side, are strong impacts to the life experience of the baby. So the history of these generations have an impact on the baby. And if there are negative experiences, it's good to talk about these negative experiences to sort them out. So everything which is out of the unconscious of the mother can be a load to the baby. So talking to the mothers in the questionnaire time is to sort things out, to clear things, which allows the mother a much clearer position in her life, in her family, and especially to the baby.
Yes, that sounds good, because we know that from research, an animal research, that the transgenerational patterns will cross over into the future generations and even compound, making it worse for the future. So it sounds very clearing and helpful for the future generations, and even the mother and father too, I suppose.
Yeah, both histories are here.
Okay. Yeah.
And the interesting thing to me as a psychoanalyst is that only talking once about all these stories is enough to clear the place and to take the load away from the pregnant woman as well as from the baby.
Yeah, your research has some really good outcomes. Like I tell them to my students, and you've published them on your website, which I'll put a link to in our show notes. But can you just tell people like the really great outcomes from the work that you've done on pregnancy and birth and postpartum?
Yeah, I did a lot of work which was not primarily intended I was just thrown into the topic as I realized that all of my pregnant mothers that I have facilitated never showed up with postpartum depression after doing the prenatal bonding BA procedure. And even I got a lot of mothers coming in after traumatic births, for example, coming in and saying, I don't want that again. And working with them was the possibility not only to heal, to heal the traumatic birth experience, and it did not come up again. So mothers came in with postpartum depression from the first pregnancy, and they never again experienced postpartum depression. It was amazing to me, not believable. I doubted at first. And then I researched carefully on all my clients that I have done, facilitated, and I saw that I had, in my cohort, was about 80 pregnancies which had no postpartum depression. And in the American cohort, where the trainees did the work with pregnant women, we had 50 without any postpartum depression, and one person that had depression symptoms in before had a light crisis, of about less than 2 weeks. That is more like baby blues than postpartum depression. And this is something that is unbelievable to most of my colleagues that deal with postpartum depression.
Yeah, it's the most common complication of pregnancy, as when they talk about it in the literature. Now it's like 1 in 5 of us who have babies are likely to have postpartum depression, and it's even worse amongst teenagers and low-income women. So I think that if there's a way we can have more people understand how to help pregnant women from your perspective, I think that it would be very beneficial. So I'll make sure people know a little bit more about you as I publish this this podcast. But I've so enjoyed connecting with you at the gatherings when we're able to come around APA when I worked there. And I remember when I presented, it was in 2016 at Seattle, and I told 3 or 4 stories that exemplified the super sentience and sensitivity of inside babies of before they're born. They're able to communicate, they're able to really have a wisdom about what they need to do to be born or to stay safe. And so I have, in my private practice, I make a good effort to connect with the babies and also help the mothers and fathers connect with the babies. But it was a wonderful moment for me when you appeared in front of me after I gave my talk and just said, oh, I totally am in the same place as you, agreeing with you about the sentience of babies. And I'm wondering, Gerhard, if you could just say a few words about your experience of babies starting in utero.
I remember well, it was in Bastia in 2016, when all these topics had been presented, and you presented yours, and I was really impressed of your perspective, as we are coming from different directions and ending up in the knowledge that the baby has a personality even in the womb. And we can refer to this personality and count on it. So many anxieties of mothers about pregnancy and birth, seem to be not so challenging for the babies. They know what to do, and they bring in a wisdom from somewhere. I can't tell you where, but they have wisdom. That's proven completely to me. And so this soul is something that is added to the new family. And why not invite the father to the sessions of prenatal bonding BA, even invite the siblings to get in contact with the baby. And a personal story of mine, a daughter of mine was pregnant in early stage of about 9 or 10 weeks. And her son came by to my daughter and said, "That's a girl." So he had been raised under prenatal bonding BA conditions during the pregnancy, and he was very sentient and interested to the baby inside. And my daughter didn't know that it was a girl, and it was right. So he felt that there was a girl inside. So what communication do we have? It's incredible.
Yeah. Well, I told you the story last week of my client who, she came in and she's got pregnant with twins, and she asked me, "Oh, should I have a planned C-section? Should I wait for them to be born?" And I said, "Well, why don't you have a conversation with your babies about that?"
Absolutely.
And so I taught her your technique of just sending images down as pictures and just trusting what comes back. I mean, I'm not trained in your technique. I just told her this is how babies can communicate if you want to try it. And I'm massaging her, and it's very quiet, and I think she's trying. She says the babies are asleep, they're not moving. And so she keeps sending little images down, and there's nothing. And then I hear this sort of squeal of delight. And I said, "What happened?" She said, "Oh, I sent a picture of myself down to them, and I said, this is what I look like." And she said they both started moving, and I get this image back of this beautiful white light. And I can only imagine it's them saying, "Well, this is what we look like." I don't know, you said maybe there's another interpretation of that, but I was so touched by this, because babies probably do experience themselves as this beautiful white sort of light, or a certain brightness, or I don't know. What do you think of this story?
It's completely clear to me that happened, and that is true. And one story that just pops up in my mind is that I had a mother with twins as well, and both twins had different channels to talk or to communicate, not to talk, but to communicate with the mother. One twin always sent pictures, and the other twin sent colors. So mothers can differentiate, so to talk to one or the other twin. But in some way, mothers have to learn the specific language which the baby uses to respond.
Right.
It's like learning a new language, and then you can communicate.
Yeah.
And this possibility to hear, to sense, to communicate to the baby goes on after birth. And so raising the children is completely easy.
Yeah, well, I know John Chitty was the one who taught me so much about babies, and he just says, you even have to just think when you're with a baby, I see you, I know who you are, I know where you come from, and I know why you're here. It's the most important thing to him when working with babies is recognition of their sentience and their capacities. And he said that's how he started all his baby sessions, was just recognition of their innate capacity, their spiritual essence, where they come from, and that they are welcome here on planet Earth, and that they're here to gain wisdom through experience. And I know that continuing to study with his wife, Anna Chitty, she helps adults find this place inside of when we come for experiences, but we have still that innate connection that the babies did. We kind of lose that as we grow up, but when we're babies, it's pretty powerful. Babies are quite astute. Mm-hmm.
I personally believe or have experienced even many times that babies have their own reason to come.
Mm-hmm.
And they decide to come to this family with some interest or some willingness to help the mother in a difficult situation, maybe, or to complete the family whatsoever. So there is a decision coming also from the baby, not only the mother and the father that decide to have a baby.
Yes, I work a lot with that with my clients and with my students. You know, there is questions in pre-perinatal that we always ask is, do you get a sense that you wanted to come? And William Emerson was big on teaching this as well. And just really in recognition of the power of choice. And if people don't feel welcome here, because many don't, many feel, because that's the imprint. I ask them what would help them feel more welcome, and we try and find that kind of nutrient together. But many people I work with have been surprised that when they ask themselves this question, did I want to come here? It was a yes. So
most people, but not everyone.
Not everyone. No.
Yeah,
No.
I work with patients in my office that did not want to come and had be sent. Mm-hmm. That's a different task, a difficult task to take on if you don't want to go and you must.
Yeah, well, then what I've helped people in there is to go back and forth between preconception, conception, and just being with the physiology sometimes of the early embryo can be enough to give them a kind of a self-protection and awareness that they can be here for their purpose with a little more ease. Yeah, but that's a different topic. I mean, I really wanted to talk with you about your work, to be very grateful to you, Gerhard, for all that you've brought our community, and to shine the light on our mutual love of the aware baby, the sentient, perceptive, and you know, sort of extra human in some ways in their greatest capacities for love. That's been my experience of babies. So thank you for joining us today. Is there anything last minute that you would like just to share with our audiences about you and your work?
Well, I feel very content about my life, as my life started in a century immediately, or in a time immediately after World War II, where babies had not been expected as sentient. They even had been not expected to feel pain.
Yes.
So I got an operation without anesthesia.
Oh, I'm sorry.
After birth. And that was something that the medical science said that is right, that is okay. And only, I think 76 was the first time that anesthetics
yes.
Was given to babies since then when they got operations. So how long the way is from being just a ball of meat after birth, from the medical perspective, to the perspective we now we now know and we can deal. And that is such a great progress in our culture.
Yeah.
And also in the perspective of pregnant women, so they can deal with the soul, not only with the difference from my beginnings to the perspective that is given today, thanks to Appa and the many heroes that Appa brought up, searching and teaching about the pre-perinatal reality. It's, for me, it's a reality. It's not only theory. I feel the reality every day when I facilitate with pregnant women.
Yes, well, we have a mutual purpose and a mutual experience, because I too, it's every day for me. And I work with babies and mothers, and I support them and help them. And I also really deeply appreciate how much we've grown as a culture, and when it comes to babies, I see a lot of progress. And now I have bridges to fetal medicine, and they are accepting that babies have experiences in utero, to parenting and obstetrics, and all kinds of wonderful communities now are really accepting that babies have experiences. And we still have a ways to go before we can make it a...
we are at the cutting edge of science in that way, but we are not in the mainstream of medical and psychological knowledge until that's what the future should bring.
Yes, not yet, but we're almost there. And I see pediatricians now asking about the birth experience of babies. And I see fetal medicine saying, well, we can realize that babies have experiences. And I see fetal origins of adult disease, people like Catherine Monk say we can talk to babies in utero. And the last place I'm seeing big changes is actually in the birthing rooms, but I know that the baby-friendly hospital movement, for example, has brought a lot more ease and comfort to babies. They're not separated as much from mother as they used to be. There's still a ways to go, but I have to say, I've been at this 20 years. I never thought that I would see more widespread acceptance, and I certainly hope that many people will register for your courses and help mothers and babies and whole families heal, and so people can go on to have more fruitful lives, finding their purpose, levels of happiness and peace and joy that they never thought possible. So thank you, Gerhard, for coming. And I always like to ask my guests, what helps your life become more beautiful?
So you asked me. Oh,
yes.
Okay.
What makes your life more beautiful?
The most beautiful experience. I have 9 grandchildren now, and I experience with every one of these babies so much more. I'm so much more open what babies say, and so I, as a grandpa, I have a direct channel to my grandchildren, which I would never have expected in earlier times.
All right, so I hear your grandchildren make your life more beautiful. That's so wonderful.
Absolutely.
Oh, I hope to have that experience myself one day.
Sure.
All right.
I'm sure.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming, and to be continued. I hope to see you at further conferences and in support of you and your work.
We will meet again. Thank you. And goodbye.
Bye.
You've been listening to A More Beautiful Life podcast. To support our show, please go to Patreon /A More Beautiful Life.